and welcome again to the start of a new season, 2021-2022. Doesn't seem like yesterday, does it? Since Wembley final against Italy, playoff semi-final against Turkey. But we are back, and we will be back now once a week during pre-season before, as and when, going twice a week if we're playing 2 games a week. Welcome back, Leigh Curtis. Leigh, delighted to see you again.
Yes, it's good to be back. It doesn't feel like we've had a break, though, does it? I don't know about everybody else, but I got a bit of football fatigue during the Euros. I only watched the England games and watched a couple of others, Italy, I think, and a Denmark game. But, it was, the season last year just seemed to go on forever, didn't it? And I just started to dial out in the Euros. But we're back again. And that famous Corbyn Twitter clip of him clapping his hands, we're back and we're ready to do it all again.
You have already, without actually saying anything, Leigh, answered the first question and the first observation on our chat section from Mark Reap. Is Leigh Curtis doing his hair again? So it looks to me like you've gone straight up the sides, but haven't quite got around to the bouffon on the top.
To be fair, it is looking rather unkempt today, but I've had a grade 2 back and sides.
Yeah,
it's a bit longer on the top, but usually I have some wax in it or some other Kelter in it to give it a bit of shape. But I couldn't be bothered today; it's too hot.
Very good. I've had a number 2 up there. I'll do it myself, as you can tell, and a number, I think it's a 5 or a 6 on there. But if I do like that, there'll be a shiny gold patch. So I'm just keeping it there, just to, not that I'm vain or anything, but
Yeah, well, I'm glad you can't see the back of mine because I'm not far behind you, I don't think.
And talking of dodgy barnets, I reckon Phil Foden can just about get away with the old bleached yellow hair. Now, obviously, a lot of our fans on Saturday didn't get the chance to see Kel Roberts, but you and I would probably have noticed him in and around the dugouts. He's gone for the old Foden sort of bleach, hasn't he? Do you reckon he carries it off or not?
He's an individual, is Kel, and he's the only player I know who could carry that off. I wouldn't dream of having me dyed blonde. It suits him well. I did ask Richard Brindley about that after the game when he sort of laughed and said, Cal's an individual. But it suits him. And if he can play like Phil Foden throughout next season, we'll all be happy with that.
Won't we just? On the show tonight, we've got 45 minutes, and we will be talking transfer latest incomings. We're expecting you to break a few exclusives in the next 45 minutes, Leigh. I hope you won't disappoint us. Assessing the incomings so far, looking at what else might be coming in. Coalville revisited. We were both there on Saturday, weren't we? Certainly bright in every sense of the word, with the sunshine and the I was going to say new mint green kit, but you've already corrected me. What colour is the new kit, please, Leigh? You obviously read the press releases a little bit more closely than I do. Go on.
So it's not mint green. According to Puma, it is green glimmer and asphalt.
Asphalt's what you put on the road.
I like it. I tell you what, it's the best away kit in my time covering the club. I love it. I think it's brilliant. I really do. I love it. I think you could, wear that out down the shops, no problem. Bit of jeans, shorts. It's an all-rounder.
Yeah, I mean, and I think it will be very popular. I'm not too sure people will refer to it as what the green, the glimmer green and asphalt kit. To be honest with you, I think it might be a bit more colloquial. But yeah, I think it will sell well. I tell you what, I did notice quite a high percentage of on Saturday were the bright, and you're going to educate me again here. I'm going to say fuchsia pink goalkeeper shirt.
Yeah,
really bright.
Magenta. Did you say magenta? Is magenta? I don't know. They come up with all these brandings, don't they, for the colours and stuff? So they'd probably call it flowery fuchsia or something like that, wouldn't they?
Yeah, to be fair, I like that one.
It's nice. The kit's brilliant this season.
yeah, a lot of people were wearing that goalkeeping kit. I think that will sell well. Ian Burchnall, the fan, not the manager, obviously, agree with Leigh. Already brought my away kit. Pete in the shop said they had almost sold out already. When I was in the shop on Sunday, Pete and Lynn Lawson, who do a sterling job in the club shop. Glad to see everything is going so well at the moment. Steve Orton says welcome back. We've mentioned Mark Reek. Jack Hobbs loved the shirt. I don't know whether he means my retro one or the new.
That is a nice shirt, though. Yeah, I love a good retro shirt. Yeah, that's very good. Yeah, very good.
Yeah, I mean, I have to, this is something that's available. It's a new shirt. This is not an original 1983 one. I couldn't afford one of them. They go, for best part of £200, just a replica. Really? Quite a cult shirt in its day. So we'll be talking. So we were getting right to say what we're going to be doing. So transfers, Coalville, and we've got our first current Notts County player as our big one-on-one guest. You know who it is, so keep quiet for a bit. And it is, I have to say, real quality. Thanks to the club, thanks to the player. Very, very good. Some great things that we'll be talking about. You can see somewhere in the background the player's name, so that narrows it down a bit, don't it? So see if you can work out who it is. We'll be revealing all a little bit later in the show. Okay, so a week into the season, is it 4 weeks to kick off, 3 weeks to kick off? What do we read in to the activity that Ian, Richard Montague, the owners have done so far into our squad, in your opinion?
Well, I think it's obviously a work in progress at the moment, isn't it? Obviously, judging by the amount of trialists that are on show at the weekend, I mean, obviously they've ticked one of the major boxes off. I think they've obviously had a list of players who were high on the priority list, such as Carl Cameron, Frank Vincent, and obviously since then they've offered trials out to Lamine Kebe Sharif. I think I pronounced that right. Andre Wright, Carl Bennett, of course, who came on in the second half, and I thought he was absolutely excellent. But I do expect this week to be some further activity. I spoke to Ian after the game at the weekend, and he said they were close to wrapping a couple up. So I think we'll probably see some more movement definitely this week. I'll
tell you one player, and this kind of kills some of our debate, and it's not meant to. I remember many moons ago when, like you, I used to be a journalist, and I was talking with Graham Taylor when he was manager at Aston Villa. Villa actually played a pre-season game at Notts, so we're probably talking late 80s. And Graham came out, and everyone's, and Notts did quite well. I can't quite remember what the score was, but Graham just deflected everything, and he just said, "Look, guys, I know you've got questions about A, questions about B, questions about C." He said, "I just want to tell you that this is our first pre-season game. We've got 5 other pre-season games coming up, and I'm not going to entertain or answer direct questions about any individual match that we've played. As far as I'm concerned, we're playing 6 pre-season games. The objective is to have the team prepared, fit, injury-free, and ready to start the season as best as we possibly can. And I don't look at any individual 90 minutes or anything like that." And subsequently, when I was speaking with Martin Allen, he told me about one pre-season game where the objective was not to score a goal. The objective was to keep the ball. For one half, all the team was ordered to do, wasn't even told to have a shot. It was just told, keep the ball. We're going to play possession for as much as we can, 45 minutes, to rehearsing set pieces. So I'm not a massive believer whether you win 9-0, lose 9-0 within reason of any playoff game, because ultimately it's Barnet on whenever it is, second week in August away. Nothing else matters. There were 2 players for me that kind of caught the eye a little bit, and one was the young keeper, Tiernan Brooks. Clearly not many of us will have seen much of him. He only he only turned 18 in June, you know. So he's not like this, you know, he's not 20 or anything. Only just turned 18. And let's be honest, Leigh, and we spoke about this on Saturday, if it had not been for him, we'd have probably been 2-0 down at half time. I thought he looked an extremely able and capable prospect for the club. I mean, what were your thoughts? How does Ian rate him? What's your take on him?
Well, I think that number 2 spot's up for grabs, isn't it? Obviously, the club let Luke Pilling go, and it's funny because obviously I live in Lincoln, and Tiernan obviously spent time on loan at Lincoln United, and the former chairman there, Rob Bradley, used to be the chairman at Lincoln City. I know Rob very well, and Rob knows his football. And when he was there, he was raving about Tiernan Brooks, saying this kid has got an absolute massive future. I remember Tiernan playing in the pre-season game against Ilkeston last year, I think it was. And the one thing that struck me about him then was I thought that his distribution was something that he needed to work on. But you can see since then, you know, he's developing really nicely. He's filled out. He's got a good stature. His starting positions as a goalkeeper are very good. His distribution was decent at the weekend. But again, it's all about what your reflexes like. And the save he made from Luke Shaw in the first half, where he spread himself, and it was a good strong hand as well with his left hand. You know, excellent save. And I think, you know, the club looking at him, if he continues to perform like that in pre-season, then he's got a great chance of becoming that number 2. I really do. I like a lot of what I've seen of him. He's got a really good goalkeeping coach in Jake Keane. And he's got a brilliant professional to learn from in Sam Slocum, who, for me, last season was arguably the best goalkeeper in the National League. I don't think there were many better than him, to be honest. So if you put all that into the melting pot, he's got a great pro to learn from. He's getting coached well. He's developing. He's doing the hard work, and it's paying off. And I thought he was absolutely exceptional on Saturday. Very, very good. And now it's all a case of, can he keep that going? Can he keep that development path growing? And can he start to really push hard for a first team place?
It's very difficult for goalkeepers at the best of times. But I guess with the modern trend, and certainly both Neil Ardley and our current manager, Ian, seem to be taking a view and a stance. They won't put a second goalkeeper on the bench. So in an absence of real reserve team football, if you're not the number 1, it must be very difficult to develop, because clearly you want competitive game time. You know, and clearly someone of the age of Tiernan will need game time to develop rather than just practice matches. But given we don't field a regular keeper on the bench, you know, I think there's a big argument to say that Tiernan is your number 2. You save a goalkeeping wage, because otherwise you're paying a reserve keeper who is going to have very, very little activity, because he's not even going to be on the bench. And then if you are Tiernan Brooks, you kind of might as well go home or go out on loan, because realistically you ain't going to get a shout. So I think it would be quite interesting to see whether the management feel Tiernan's done enough. Because if, for instance, Sam got a bad injury in the second, third game, God forbid, you can still do emergency loans and things with goalkeepers, can't you? So
right.
It's still covered in a sense. If you didn't quite think Tiernan could play 3 months on the trot, you've got the flexibility to do emergency loans.
Yeah, I mean, it's again, we're talking about that substitution rule. I mean, ordinarily you would, in the Football League, you would carry a goalkeeper on the bench, wouldn't you? But this farcical rule that the National League have, where you can only carry 5 subs on the bench, and I'm told that despite a host of clubs, I know Notts have raised it with the National League to suggest that, you know, they want the rules changing and that they want the 7 subs and follow the likes of League 2, League 1, the Championship, etc. I'm told it's not even been discussed. It's not even been raised. So I really don't foresee that rule changing for next season. So I would expect, again, to have 5 subs, which is a shame, really, because as we saw last season, it did happen on a few occasions, didn't it? You know, the Chesterfield goalkeeper got injured in the playoff quarter-final, sorry. And obviously Sam went down, didn't he? Got sent off against Dagenham, and we had to end up putting Michael Doyle in goal. So I find it a bit nonsensical, to be honest, that the National League doesn't have 7 subs, because it does stump players' development. Because even just to have Tiernan on the bench and being part of the whole first team experience, it's denying him that opportunity, really. And I don't really see the sense for it. I can maybe understand why a few of the sort of financially cash-strapped clubs would argue for a 5-sub rule, because they perhaps don't have the strength and depth to name 7 subs. But even then, you would think that they will have their own youth development players, the players that they would like to develop. And it kind of defeats the object of, trying to bring players on, because even if you could put a 16-year-old, a 17-year-old on the bench, just to have them part of that experience, see how it goes on, be part of the warm-ups, be part of the half-time team talks, be part of the whole experience, they would learn so much. But obviously with this 5-sub rule, it sort of denies it. But going back to Tiernan, I think again, Ian didn't name a substitute goalkeeper on the bench, did he, last season? Neil Ardley did the same. I don't think many managers in the league next year will do it, because I don't see the sub rule changing. So it's going to be hard, because obviously the only way that Tiernan is going to develop is through training during the week. He's not going to be able to play competitive games unless something like you say happens to Sam Slocum.
Pythagorean says Tiernan shoe in for number 2 after shoe in for second choice keeper after Saturday, saves on budget for other players. NCFC Pie, good to be back. Can't see any point of going out to get another keeper. Slocum is going to be first choice all the time and not going to have anyone else on the bench. Brooks is perfect for us. Ian Burchnall, do we know if league committee has agreed to increase in subs next season? We've kind of just spoken about that. NCFC Pie, talking of subs, Notts and other clubs were campaigning for more subs. Has anything been considered by the league? Again, you've kind of answered that. And I don't really want to necessarily stick up for the National League here. But I think they will argue that this is a debatable point among the clubs as to whether it should be 5 or 7 substitutes, and that there are a not insignificant group of clubs in the National League who would campaign to keep it at 5 subs, because they feel it gives the bigger clubs a competitive advantage by having 7. Now, I would agree with you. I think it should go to 7, because the National League should mirror the depth and the professionalism of the Football League. But I would accept an argument from the National League, if they ever engaged in public debate with anyone and explained their rationale, that says, hang on a minute, there's more clubs want to keep it at 5 than 7. And so then for the bigger clubs to say, well, it's a Mickey Mouse league, then I can kind of understand the National League saying, well, hang on a minute, not everyone is Notts County or Stockport or Wrexham. And I kind of get that argument. I don't know where the majority or the balance lies. I don't even know whether you have a straight vote. So that of how many clubs have got in the National League? 24. So if you put a vote, whether you put a rule change in and say, right, it's 7 subs and you vote on it, and whoever gets to 13 wins the vote. I don't know whether it works like that or not, but it would be interesting to know from the National League. It'd be interesting to know from Notts, is that what happens? Because then if it's 13-11, keeping it at 5 subs, okay, fair enough. Majority rule, and we kind of understand a bit more about that process.
Yeah, I mean, I find it daft. I think if the National League, it sort of counts itself as the unofficial League 3, doesn't it, with the amount of teams? You look at the standing of the league next season, it's ridiculous. Wrexham, Grimsby, Chesterfield, Stockport, Notts. You can go through them all. It's going to be such a tough league next year, and it almost is like a League 3, isn't it? I do find it quite bizarre that they don't have 7 subs, really. I mean, there's nothing to stop, even if the 7 sub rule did come in and clubs can't afford to name or can't name 7. There's no rule to say that you have to field 7. You can still name 5, and the other team can name 7 if you've got, we've seen that before, haven't we? When teams have had bad injuries and they've not been able to name a full bench. So, but I just think that the wider point is that I do think it's denying the development of young players, particularly those who, certainly if you've got a game, for instance, where you've got a few injuries, and you want to be able to put a couple of young lads on the bench just to get a bit of a taste of it, to make them feel as if they're involved as well, is more importantly. But I don't think we'll ever get to the bottom of it. I mean, the National League and its communication isn't the greatest, but yeah, that's as far as far as I know and what I've been told, that it's been put forward, but it's not even been discussed.
Actually, a great compromise solution by NCFC Pie: 5 subs plus a keeper, sorted. Elvis, but they could say 6 subs, but one of the 6 must be a sub goalkeeper. We shall see. Most probably nothing will change, but all the best to Tiernan, and hope he can at least be our regular number 2 this season, and then is moving forward. Right, that's a good debate on goalkeeping. I guess what lots of people like to talk about is who's coming in, and I think, Ian, you did an interview with Ian afterwards, didn't you? Where he spoke about some of the types of player that he's looking at. He's mentioned that goal-scoring centre forward or a goal-scoring striker. It has been mentioned, and you wouldn't need to be a rocket scientist for this, for central midfield brackets plural. Possibly. Another what you might call strike centre half. What's your take on things?
Well, obviously the centre of midfield is a major priority. I have to say, though, I know Michael Doyle has stepped up into the assistant manager's role, but when he came on Saturday, he was absolutely ridiculously good again. But obviously, with him being elevated into that position, Jake Reeves has obviously gone. That is, for me, is such an important area of the pitch to get right for next season. But also, I really do believe the club needs to go out and get a centre forward this year, one of decent repute. I mean, we looked last season. One of the biggest problems that Notts had last year was their over-reliance on Carl Wootton. Now, it was fantastic that he stayed fit throughout the entire season. I mean, his record in terms of being fit and available is ridiculous. He's reliable in that sense, but can you afford to keep on taking that gamble? I'm not so sure you can. And I think, touch wood that nothing ever happens to Carl, but if he goes down and is out 2-3 months of the season, have we got another centre forward who's capable of leading the line like he does? I don't see it at the moment. If we were to go through them individually, Lewis Knight still seems to be finding his feet. Elijah Sam was very hit and miss. Ruben Rodriguez, I would say, is more of a second striker, number 10, rather than an authentic number 9. And that for me is just as a big of importance as the centre of midfield, because I really feel that the lack of striking options last year. Well, I know Ruben Rodriguez came into form brilliantly towards the back end of the season, but for large parts of the campaign, we struggled for goals. When Kyle went on that real barren run, we struggled to have another centre forward on the books who looked capable of hitting double figures. And it wasn't until the masterstroke of Ruben Rodriguez being put up there that we started to look a lot more threatening. I mean, obviously, Callum Roberts is going to come back, and touch wood, he'll be okay. So that gives us more creative options, but he's not centre forward. And I do feel that's one area that looks weak for me, particularly when you compare and contrast to the other teams that you expect to be challenging. Stockport, Paddy Madden, Scott Quigley. Southend went and got Reece Murphy from Yeovil. These teams will be strong up front, and goals undoubtedly win your games. And I think that we need somebody to just help take the burden off Carl a little bit. We can't be in the same situation as we were last year, hoping and praying that he gets through every game without picking up any injuries. And I think that's a position that I think the club really needs to look at long and hard. And I don't think it can be another development player either. I don't think it can be a player who you're going to wait to see if they can come good in a year or 6 months' time. It needs to be someone, I feel, who can hit the ground running, provide that little bit of extra competition. And if Kyle needs a rest, because there were times last season, particularly against Yeovil in the 2-2 draw at their place, I thought he looked tired as a result of playing week in, week out. And, we've got to remember he's still a young player himself. So I think if that's one area of concern of mine approaching the season, that would be it, as well as the centre midfield. They're going to need a holding midfield player. If they're obviously going to play somebody in that Michael Doyle role, so they need somebody to sit in front of the back three. And need a couple of number 8s. Obviously, Frank Vincent's come in, and I'm sure there'll be another one added to that list before the start of the season.
I should just Dale Pike's just dropped me a note, and I did say I met a group of 4 lads, they're as old as I am, on Saturday behind one of the goals at Coalville. I did say we'd give them a shout out. So to Dale Pike, now of Sheffield, but unbelievably, I said, where did he grow up? He said Snenton, and he went to my same school, Greenwood School. There you go. So Steve Cartwright, who makes the journey from Mexborough in South Yorkshire, Mick Webster, an old Gedling boy, now based in Belper, and Steve Howitt from Chilwell. All the best. Shout out to you guys. Pythagorum's normally good on these quizzes. Quick quiz question: can anyone get this right by the end of the show? Greenwood School, my old school, in Collick Woods, top of Snenton. One very famous Premier League footballer went to Greenwood School, and his mother is a massive Notts County fan. Who is the player? You've had your one guess and you've got it wrong, because if you got it right, it would have knackered the competition up, wouldn't it? So you got it wrong, Leigh. 19 minutes. We're going to do 45 minutes tonight, because technically you're working. Well, you're working on here at the minute, but not for Reach. So let's see if anyone in the next 19 minutes can get that. Played top level, went to Greenwood School, Snenton boy. His mum is a massive Notts County fan. Right. Let's see who can get that. And let's go back a little bit to players coming in, players coming out. We said it a bit earlier, the importance, one of the key things of pre-season, and we do not want to be alarmist here, is keeping players fit. Now, Alex Lacey hasn't been able to figure much at the moment, and from what we understand, he's not necessarily likely to be figuring in the imminent future. So certainly there's some work to be done with Alex on his fitness. And the new guy from Bournemouth picked up a knee injury towards the end of last season. And I think you did the story last week. He's not quite ready to start pre-season yet. So in terms of the personnel that we've got, clearly that puts a bit more focus on the centre midfield, depending how quickly Vincent can get back up to speed.
Yeah. I'm not sure. I don't think, from what I'm hearing, that it's particularly that Frank Vincent's going to miss the opening game of the season. I just think he'll be going through the recovery process. In terms of the other injuries, Alex, he obviously had that problem towards the back end of last season. I think he might be touch and go. But as for the rest of them, Ruben Rodriguez and Elijah Sam, they weren't involved at the weekend, but they're fit. They were just doing some running. They missed a couple of sessions last week. And Callum Roberts is doing well by all accounts. But as Ian said after the game, it's day by day with him at the moment. So I think overall, Notts will be in a decent shape, I think, come the opening game of the season. I expect them to get a couple of deals over the line this week. But yeah, I think obviously the priority really is getting those players in through the door first and foremost, just to be able to give people a chance to settle down as well. It's like you say, the start of the season was just over a month's time, isn't it? So 4 weeks, August the 22nd. So you ideally want your business done as quickly as possible, just to give everybody a chance to settle down, learn the patterns of play, to develop relationships, get out, do a bit of work on in the friendlies and things. So, but as always, you're keeping your fingers crossed that nobody suffers any further injuries in pre-season, as we saw last year, because it happened to Cal, didn't it, in the Harrogate game? in the FA Trophy semi-final. So I think they'll be in decent shape. I'm not worried. Let's put it that way.
Good. We've had a few competition entrants. Richard Hawksworth, Andy Cole obviously didn't listen to you. No, that's a no. Barry says Darren Huckabee. No, was a Nottingham boy, but not him. Malcolm Shearston says Jermaine Genus, Nottingham boy. No. Ben Hawksworth, Leon Best. No, although he was at Notts. But Spotter's badge goes to Pythagorean. This is Tom Huddleston. Did you know that? Well, obviously you didn't know that, Leigh. Nottingham boy, Snenton, went to Greenwood School, picked up by Derby, but his mum is a massive Notts fan, season ticket holder. Yeah, so Tom Huddleston. Not many people obviously know that one. Talking of Derby, are we going to be able to play them? Because all sorts of things seem to be going off with them at the minute.
Well, it's a bit of a mess at the moment. I did a story earlier on. Basically, they're in a bit of a pickle because obviously they're in a transfer embargo at the moment. So they can't. Well, they can register players for a year or up to. So they can have 6-month loans, but it's been muddied by the fact that you can only do that if you don't have a 23-man squad. Now, at the moment, what they call a 23-man squad, you're allowed to staff up, is what they call it, with players who are considered of a professional standing. Now, unfortunately, Derby named their entire youth team in an FA Cup game against Chorley last year, and because they've made one senior appearance for the club, they count as players of professional standing. So at the moment, Derby are up to their 23 players, with these youth team players included. So I think at the moment Derby are putting an appeal to the EFL to try and get those rules relaxed. I'm not sure they're going to have much joy if I'm honest, but yeah, so they're in a bit of a right pickle. I mean, Wayne Rooney came out yesterday and had some very strong comments to make, saying he's only got one centre back and he can't do anything. His hands are tied at the moment. He can't add any signings until the EFL make a decision on this rule as to whether they can make further signings and do away with this professional standing. I think Derby's argument is, well, we had to play that FA Cup game because there was a COVID outbreak. If you remember, there was a big outbreak at the club and the FA said they had to play the game, so Derby sent the youth team. So the circumstances, I do sympathise with them in that respect because it was unique. But yeah, they're in a little bit of a pickle.
Yeah. Hey, might put a few on the gate at Meadow Lane if Wayne Rooney comes out of retirement as a sweeper, wouldn't it? Because I know he's only got one centre half at the minute. That'd be quite nice, wouldn't it?
I tell you, they've obviously got Ravel Morrison, who Ian Burchnall coached, didn't he? So, so he's playing. He's on trial there at the moment. I think they've got a couple of others as well. Phil Jagielka's there, Richard Stearman. So, but of course they can't sign them, and and at some point these players who they've got are going to want to know whether they can get a contract at Derby. So they really haven't got a lot of time to wait around because, if somebody comes in for Ravel Morrison now and says, right, I'm going to give him a 3-year deal, he's not going to turn around and say, well, I'm just going to wait for Derby. He's going to want to get a contract sorted, get himself tied down to a deal somewhere. So, yeah, it really is a very, very messy situation at Derby at the moment. Of course, then you've obviously got the ownership and the sale of the club and the takeovers that didn't happen. So it's not good.
Let's just look at some of our rivals and put into context some of the spending in the National League at the minute, because it's interesting where there is, albeit an advisory salary cap at Leagues 1 and 2, and you are. It would appear in the National League at the minute that there are a few clubs where there is no salary cap, so no one's breaking any rules here. That the top end of the National League clubs, they're going for it. So Wrexham are clearly splashing the cash, as are Stockport. But other clubs are making decent signings as well. My understanding from speaking to people at the minute is that the top end of the National League are paying significantly higher wages than a whole groundswell of League 2 clubs and even some League 1 clubs. because kind of League One and League Two, as a result of COVID, have kind of brought themselves into an unofficial position where they say, look, we can't afford the bigger wages that we used to. We need to have a little bit more of collective sense, at least for a season or two, while we get ourselves back on the feet. And there are advisory salary caps. In the National League, it is completely open. And so it would appear that some clubs are really, really, really going for it. I mean, without going at this juncture into the debate about whether there should be a salary cap in the National League or not, it is interesting that the bigger clubs in the National League this season seem to be kind of getting their acts together and giving it a real go. Because if you think when Notts dropped into the National League, 3 of the 4 teams that have gone up in the last 2 seasons hadn't been in the Football League for a long time. So it was Barrow and Harrogate for the first time. And to all intents and purposes, Barrow had ceased to be a league club and were, inverted commas, non-league outfit. So Barrow and Harrogate in our first season. Last season, Sutton won it, and Hartlepool managed to go through the playoffs. How difficult do you think it is this year in the context of the previous 2 years in terms of the standard of the competition that Notts are going to be coming up against?
I think it's going to be really dark. We said last year, didn't we, and we felt that it was perhaps Notts' best chance of getting out of the league last season because the competition that they were going to face. It's not just because the fact that these clubs are obviously making signings, but the fact that a lot of them have welcomed new owners. Grimsby have just been taken over. Wrexham were taken over. Stockport were taken over, weren't they, as well? So these owners have come in, and the best way to endear yourself is to the supporters is to go out and invest in the transfer market, because as we all know, the fans live and die by the transfer policy. They love it. You know, it's a source of excitement, and they want to see that reflected in the ambition of the club and who they go out to sign. And you'd certainly say Stockport have done that. Wrexham will do. Chesterfield have obviously, since they were they were taken over, weren't they, by the Supporters Trust, if I'm right in saying, have gone out and spent a fair bit of dough. I think next year will be the toughest season since Notts came down, without a shadow of a doubt. Just purely, if you look at the status of the clubs as well, Grimsby, you know, they'll be strong. New owners again. Paul Hurst has been out of the league before, has been there, seen it and done it.
Yeah.
Stockport, you know, Ben Whitfield, Scott Quigley, John Rooney, Paddy Madden, all in the same team. I mean, there's no guarantee that money ever guarantees you success. I mean, if you look at Sutton last year, I'd imagine their wage bill compared to the likes of Notts and Stockport, you know, hugely, there's a huge disparity there. But they went out and got players who a really good mix. They have young players such as I can't pronounce his name, Ola Ofe from Millwall, Ajiboy. Then they had the likes of Rob Milsom, Craig Eastman, you know, good seasoned veteran pros. Omar Bugiel, I think he used to be at Forest Green Rovers. So there was a good blend there, and they all knew the lower leagues. And with that sprinkling of youthful excitement and exuberance, you know, they got themselves over the line. You know, you'd look at Harrogate when they went up. If you looked at that team that went up, it wasn't blessed with a lot of players who you'd say were household names in the lower leagues. They were shrewd in their recruitment. In fact, many of them they recruited from the likes of guys. I think Aaron Martin, who played up front, had played for guys, and he caused us no end of problems in that final. So it just goes to show that money isn't always a guarantee of success in this league, but what it does do is it gives you a better chance. You know, Stockport, if you look at Stockport, they finished, was it third? Yeah, third. Obviously didn't go up, but they've gone out, and now, yeah, I mean, if you look at that team with Whitfield, Madden, Quigley, you've got the centre half, I can't remember his name now, but, you know, look very, very strong.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, yeah. Hit double figures again, didn't he, last year, Rooney? So I think it's going to be really difficult. I think it's going to be really difficult. It's going to be. I think it's going to be fascinating. I do. I think it's going to be fascinating because I think for all of the money that Stockport spent, I do think there's a few clubs in there, Notts included, who I think will give them a real run for their money.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting when because looking at, I just pulled up the betting odds for this coming season, and Notts are something like joint third, stroke fifth favourites. And in some respects, I think that may help us a little bit. Stockport are favourites at 5-1. Wrexham half a point out, 11-2. Then Southend, Grimsby, the two relegated teams, and ourselves are 8-1. Chesterfield figure very highly as well, 9-1. Torquay 10. So those sort of is it 7 clubs, all ex-league clubs, are very much who the bookies think is going to be dominating. You then go out to Dagenham at 20-1. And Neil Ardley at Solihull at 20-1. If you want a real, if you want a pound to win 500, that's Dover for you on minus.
See, I've been impressed with a couple of their signs. I've been impressed with a couple of their signs.
Going bust and going broke. By the way, they seem to be all right now. From what I know, so I think one of the biggest challenges Stockport will have, and I think Wrexham will have, is really the pressure that Notts have had to try and deal with in the first 2 seasons, where you expected to win every game. Because with the money that those 2 clubs have spent, there will be a big burden of expectation. Now, if you can come out the traps, Notts never really were able to manage this. If you can come out the traps and win 6 or 7 of your first 8 games, you're on a real flyer and a real roll, aren't you? And the whole momentum thing builds. But it will be interesting. I think Phil Parkinson is an excellent manager. I think he's the best manager in the National League at the moment. Interestingly, Sean Brisley's gone there, hasn't he? Notts fans will remember. So I think that could help Notts a little bit by not being favourites. How big a plus do you think it can be for Notts to have 5,000-6,000 at Meadow Lane, assuming we're winning a few games, week in, week out? Because undoubtedly, Les Brad would have a theory that it really hit Notts more than most, where we didn't have fans in the stadium at Meadow Lane.
Yeah, I would agree with that. There were games last season where the complete absence of the supporters, I felt, really affected Notts, because if you recall the season when we reached the playoff final and that momentum we had before the season was curtailed, the home record that year was brilliant. I think they only lost twice at home, and I felt certainly that a lot of teams turned up at Meadow Lane and were pretty much already beaten before they'd even stepped foot on the pitch. I think the atmosphere, particularly the Kop, when Notts were attacking the Kop, it gives Notts an extra lift. And for some of the teams who have the less salubrious surroundings and perhaps aren't used to big crowds, it does affect you. It's emotional, and you've got to manage that. So we saw the difference it made in the game against Chesterfield. And the game against Weymouth, just how much of an advantage it is having your own supporters behind you. And I think that can make a big difference because Notts' home record, in that first season when we just missed out against Harrogate was absolutely sensational. And that is the bedrock of any promotion push, really. You've got to be so good at home. And last year, I just felt with everything stripped away, teams could turn up, they come out of the tunnel, fantastic surroundings. They haven't got 6,000 Notts fans screaming at them. They haven't got to deal with the noise. And they could just turn up and enjoy themselves. And I think that's probably why, Notts struggled at home in some games. But I think, that then the fans having them back and having them create that atmosphere, which we all know when Meadow Lane's rocking, it's a brilliant stadium, one of the best in the lower league, particularly when the Kop get going. Fantastic. So I do think that can make a real advantage. And one thing we perhaps haven't discussed is how important Callum Roberts is going to be. Callum, for me, is the best player in the National League. We've got no doubts about that at all in my mind. If we can keep him fit, then he will get. He's like that marquee signing. He is your marquee signing because for me, on his day, he's unplayable. Such a clever player, causes absolute pandemonium to opposing defences, and we missed him. If we'd have had Callum Roberts fit last year, we would have gone much closer for the title. I've absolutely no doubt about that in my mind. And it was just an absolute travesty that we didn't see him play more often, because even in the game when he played against Chesterfield, even the games that he did play, I think in the 3-2 when we won 3-2 at the Pro Act, brilliant. And he was not even didn't look fully fit. So he's the kind of player that just makes such a big difference. And I think him and Rodriguez in the same team, behind the likes of a Wootton, and even if you throw, let's for instance say Notts go out and get Carl Bennett, you're talking Carl Bennett, Rodriguez, Roberts, Wootton. That's a real good attacking quartet, fantastic attacking quartet. And as we all know, I think, Cal Roberts is an absolute darling of Notts, and fans love him. We all love him. The media lads get on great with him, and I think he could be, as much as we're looking at the new signings coming in. I think again he's probably pivotal to Notts' chances of success next season. And I'm just praying that he's fit and we can keep him fit all season.
Richard Hawksworth agrees with you. Roberts being fit is the biggest factor in whether we succeed or fail. Ian Burchnall, Meadow Lane being a fortress will be key this season. Richard Hawksworth agree, Paul, a good start, absolutely essential, which we haven't had in the last 2 seasons. Dover, I stand corrected at on -12 rather than -10. It's probably why they're 500 to 1 as opposed to 450 to 1. For those of you who want to put a pound on. Moddy Moby talking about Meadow Lane. Is it back to normality or is it still staggered regarding seating?
Good question.
I don't think the club have formally communicated exactly what the situation is. My understanding is that stadiums can now be, as from today, more or less near full capacity. So I think from a Notts perspective, any Notts fans, as the legislation currently stands, wanting to go into a game will be able to get in. If we were looking at a 14,000 crowd, it might be slightly different. Notts, broadly speaking, have a 3,000 season ticket holder base, sell up to 2,000 to 3,000 match day tickets. So I think that everybody, as it stands, that wants to go and watch Notts from day one is going to be fine, but I don't think Notts have officially communicated the policy just yet. Like everyone else, they're probably waiting for Boris to change it 3 times in the next 24 hours. But daft as it seems, we got slightly longer because the National League kicks off later than everyone else this year, doesn't it? Normally, it kicks off first. So by the time the Premier League kicked off and the Football League's kicked off, we should know exactly where we stand. Right. Our Thursday show, one-on-one, current player. You know the guy pretty well, Leigh, and he's also going to be one of our 2 sponsored players this season. So we have Lewis Knight again, and although I lean there so you can see Kel Roberts, not Kel Roberts, it's the guy. Oh, wrong finger. I'm pointing the wrong way. Over there. Hang on. Completely lost it. I'm trying to reverse it on this day. So Richard Brindley is one of our 2 sponsored players this season. He replaces Mark Ellis, who of course has moved to Barrow. I did over an hour with Richard last week, and it is an absolutely brilliant podcast, I have to say. And Richard, the great orator, great communicator, great value.
Yeah, great lads as well. Yeah, really good player as well. I like Richard. He's always very always comes with some good lines. You speak to a lot of players and sometimes they fall into that trap of just repeating the same old cliches. But Richard, he's very intelligent, good looking boy as well. you know, he's a great lad, and I've really enjoyed, you know, having the chance to speak. I remember when he first came in, we did an interview with him. He was absolutely fantastic. I think we did like 45 minutes to an hour with him, and he was just, you know, talking about his career. And yeah, he's a great player and a thoroughly likable bloke as well.
Yeah, and I mean, it's a mix, this interview. As people that watch these will know, it's not just, you know, tactics, team moves. This is very much a broad brushstroke of Richard's entire career. We actually talk at some length about the whole Maurice Ross issue, and Richard talks about how the players got together to meet in the wake of the comments, spoke with the club, and he was full of praise for the way the club acted in that matter. And he does recount a story of when he was at Chesterfield much earlier in his career, where he was the subject of racist trolling on social media, and he issued a reply on social media, and Chesterfield and his agent both told him to take down his reply and you know, don't draw attention to it, sweep it under the carpet. And so he spoke very passionately about it, and said how pleased he and the rest of the players were with the leadership of the owners and of the club in taking appropriate and decisive levels of action. We talk, and you alluded to it there, he's a good looking boy, so I think many of you may know that he does a bit of modelling. He does a bit, as you do, Leigh, as you do. Not with that hair.
Yeah, still waiting for my call.
So he talks about his modelling, and I nicked a line from you about Jim O'Brien.
That was brilliant. That was when Jim did the dissected all the characters in the dressing room for the player final. When he gave his take on all the players, and that was fantastic. That brilliant. I love putting that together. Very funny.
And Jim said that I don't follow Brins on Instagram, but if I did, I'm sure he'd have loads of pictures of him modelling. So I've dug out a load of pictures of him modelling, and we show them on screen, and he talks about it. And there's this very funny story about on his modelling. He's on like a professional modelling agency, and there's a little bio of him which I dug out, and he didn't know this. He took it all very well. And on height, it's got 5'10.5 inches. You know, so I've said to him, the half an inch is really important in it, Brins, you know. And he says, well, normally you have to be 6 foot to be a model. So if we thought we'd put 5'10.5, yeah. And then on his shoe size, it's not 8. It's 8.5. So I said, well, you put the half inches everywhere here, don't you? You know, so he was very, very good. And he also speaks very eloquently about comparing and contrasting the two playoff campaigns or so ago. Still waiting for Bajna to join Knots on Trial after that podcast. No Bajna. No Bajna. I don't know whether you spoke to him much when he was here. He was a character, wasn't he?
Yeah, I remember doing the Leighton Orient game, and I just wondered what on earth had happened. There was just this. I remember looking towards the away end and just seeing this sea of hungry flags. It was an insane time. Really, I remember Jamie Dixon, I think, who's the former press officer. Basically, he's telling me he had to ban Hungary from posting on because it just kept getting hijacked. No, it's just fantastic, brilliant, very, very funny. It was a good time, funny time.
Yeah, and also this morning for a future one, you are far too young to remember this man, but not supporters of a certain vintage will remember Ian McCulloch, the Flying Scotsman, Crazy Leg, Super Mac, you name it. He had all sorts of nicknames. And it's so long ago, believe it or not, Leigh, that Ian McCulloch, as a teenager, played against Alex Ferguson.
Blimey.
For a reserves game in Scotland. So that tells you how old, you know. So he was like king of the castle for Notts in the 1980s when we had Howard Wilkinson coming on board. So nice and busy there. Apologies, I'm just seeing a couple of you guys out there saying it's been buffering a little bit. Robert Holland stuck on a loop. hopefully we catch up. Not heard that one before. Not quite sure whether we've not been paying the broadband bill, son, or what, but we will investigate that. Leigh, thank you ever so much for taking time out from your day job. Are you off to Telford on Saturday, by the way?
Yes, I will be. Yeah, I'll be there at Telford. Went there last year, so looking forward to that. Hoping that we might see Rodriguez and Sam and maybe even a little bit of Callum Roberts. But yeah, I'll be there.
Yeah, well, first things, because I didn't know this, thanks to Steve Howard of Chilwell, who I saw on Saturday. Telford's ground isn't in Telford, you know.
No.
They've got a new one, a new book said, and it's in Wellington or somewhere like that. So
yeah, it's a nice little ground actually. It's a really nice little setup. Yeah,
I've never been before.
Yeah, it's nice. It is nice. Yeah, it's certainly one of the better non-league grounds I've been to. When you compare it to some of the others, it's got a nice big stand. Yeah, should be a good game.
My son, Fountain of All Knowledge, he reckons Telford play in black and white. So that means that hang on, let's see if I can get this right. The glimmer green and asphalt kit will be worn again. Is that correct?
Green glimmer and asphalt, yeah.
Green, well, nearly. Yeah. I got it the wrong way round. Your name,
yeah, green glimmer and asphalt
as well. You see the names on here as well. Yeah. Leigh, thank you very much indeed. We will look forward to getting you back on in the not too distant future. Moddy Mobley says, thanks, Leigh. That trim is top notch. Look forward to seeing you.
It didn't cost me much money to have my haircut like that. It's like,
well, much money. If it cost you any money, you've been ripped off. Hey, let's be honest. Hey, my excuse is it don't cost me anything. What's yours? Your missus don't do it, does she? What? I'm not insulted, Mrs. Curtis, have I?
No, I genuinely, I'd only go to a proper barber's. But obviously, reading some of these comments on the side, perhaps I ought to consider changing again.
Hey, Leigh, thank you very much indeed. Look forward to seeing you in Wellington or wherever Telford play at the New Books Head on Saturday. Look forward to welcoming you to the show soon. Everyone that's come in tonight, it's been busy tonight. Thank you so much for joining us again. Live shows will be carrying on a Monday, so we'll be reviewing Telford and hopefully looking forward to one or two centre midfielders, a goal scoring striker, possibly another centre half, and we're starting to get ready then, aren't we? Oh, and I think right on cue, Leigh has already left or he's just got frozen. So thank you very much indeed. Look forward to catching everyone in the near future, and make sure you listen out for Richard Brindley on Thursday evening. Good night for now.